Global enterprises rely on Savient's Identity Cloud for unparalleled visibility and control over every single human and machine identity. Enterprises can better secure business processes, enable digital operations, and empower everyone who works for them and with them. Savient provides right time, right level access to the digital technologies and tools they need to do their best work. Visit securityweekly.com/Savient to schedule a demo. Graylog elevates enterprise-level cybersecurity through its comprehensive SIEM, centralized log management, and API security solutions. Built on the Graylog platform, Graylog Security combines SIEM, security analytics, threat detection, and incident response capabilities. Unlike traditional SIEMs, which offer complex and costly setups, Graylog Security simplifies security and operational challenges with an optimal blend of licensing, people, and infrastructure costs. To see a demo, visit securityweekly.com/Graylog. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Aaron Costello joins us today to talk about SaaS misconfigurations. He's an experienced bug hunter and SaaS security expert and has a long history of discovering and reporting critical vulnerabilities with a wide range of impact on the tech industry and its customers. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Thank you, Adrian. It's fantastic to be on.
Yeah, very excited about this conversation. I think we first talked about you on the podcast back when your report on, I think it was Salesforce, misconfigurations issues. Like, I'm not even sure if we can call them vulnerabilities, right? Back when that went viral.
Right, yeah, and I think that was probably around 4 years ago now at this point, since the Salesforce release. And so you're completely correct in that these are misconfigurations, right? And not vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So I'm going to take my notes. Like I usually map out a discussion flow, like what order we're going to talk about things. It usually goes into like how well, in this type of interview, in this case, how you got into the industry and stuff. But I feel like it's important enough that we should just start with what we were just talking about. These aren't things that get CVEs, right? In a lot of cases, these are things that are, sometimes maybe they're on the other side of the shared responsibilities line. Sometimes they're on the customer side. So I want to dive into that a bit more. Like these misconfigurations, sometimes we call them vulnerabilities or exploits, which I don't think is really accurate. And these aren't you are looking for things. You probably have some CVEs to your name, right? These that we're talking about, when you find an issue with ServiceNow or Salesforce or Oracle NetSuite, oftentimes they're misconfigurations that affect thousands of customers all at once, right?
Right, exactly. And so it is a very blurred line between the terminology of a misconfiguration and a vulnerability. And you're completely correct in that it all falls within the shared responsibility model. Okay. So when we're talking about my Salesforce research, or my ServiceNow research, or my NetSuite research as of recent, these are issues stemming from misconfigurations and access controls that customers have made and not the vendor, right? So when you're provisioned or you purchase a ServiceNow instance or a Salesforce instance, it is inherently secure from these misconfigurations. There's no data being exposed necessarily or anything like that, but it's through the customer's use of the platform and granting permissions and exposing APIs and things like that, that these issues start to arise over time. And so these are issues not only caused by the customer, but also to be remediated by the customer, right? Because it is through their own personal customizations that these things have occurred.
And, I just kind of want to get your experience with this. What are the reasons typically for this? Because in a lot of cases, it seems like with the Amazon S3 bucket being kind of the classic case of this, that oftentimes this is unintentional on the customer's part. Like they didn't mean to do this, or maybe they did mean to do it, but just misunderstood the full gravity of what they were doing when they made that configuration change. How much of this responsibility, like particularly if there's a big, significant number of customers who have made this mistake, is it maybe better documentation that should have been there? Or UI, UX things are maybe should have been better labeled so that they understood exactly what they're doing. Because I know AWS, in the many, many years that we've been seeing public S3 buckets, has made considerable changes to, like adding additional warnings and things like that. Like, hey, when you push this button, the whole world's going to be able to see it. Like making sure there's no question as to the terrible mistake you're about to make.
Right, exactly. And I think there is a mix, right? A mix of root causes here. And on the vendor side of things, exactly what you spoke about, which is the documentation piece, right? That is something that has been inherently missing with a lot of the major SaaS applications, in which the consequences of performing certain actions or granting certain access controls or creating access controls has real world implications, right? There is a misunderstanding and a miscommunication between customers and the vendors when it comes to that sort of stuff. And as you mentioned with the S3 bucket, initially, when all of these public S3 buckets were starting to surface, there was a lack of warning to the customer by the vendor as to why you should not do this and what the risks are and what the risks are associated with that. And what we've seen now from my research previously is that vendors are starting to do more of this and start to show pop-ups or warnings. Are you really sure you want to do this? Or after the fact, there'll be a permanent warning banner saying, hey, just so you know, this data is public, right? And so that is moving in the right direction. Now, on the customer side of things, this is where it gets tricky because these are very, very large and complex solutions that can be used in a variety of ways. So there are tons of different avenues that could be at the cause of an exposure. But typically what I've noticed is firstly, the easy button. Okay, so if a platform administrator, so someone who's responsible for granting the permissions on SaaS applications or things like that, if they want to grant access to a certain group or a certain individual, they'll over permission that access, right?
Chmod 777, right? Fixes
Exactly,
everything.
right? So instead of creating a role that just is minimal read access and having to configure all of that for one specific resource, it's like, well, this other role we already have, yeah, it's read and write and delete, it's full CRUD, but it exists. So I'm just going to select this.
Everyone full control.
Exactly. And then comes the issue of the avenue of exposure, which is these endpoints, these APIs, which can be queried to extract information that may have accidentally been exposed. And that's firstly a documentation issue. So in many cases, those APIs are not documented sufficiently. And number two, when you're looking at customer implementations, developers and platform administrators will stick to what they know. So if you look at ServiceNow as an example, there are tons of different ways to create APIs and implement APIs and access. Your GraphQL, REST API, SOAP API, you've got tons. And organizations will typically lean heavily to one side and just use whether it's GraphQL or REST API or SOAP. And so are vastly, they're just completely unaware of all these other APIs and what they do and what access controls are associated with those. So what ends up happening is, even in the event that a public permissions are assigned to the public, right? And a resource has a public access control. Well, in their mind, they're thinking, well, there's no API that we know of that lets you get access to public data. And the key word there is that you know of. So what I always tell people is, if you have public access controls, right, you need to assume that is exactly what it means. It is public. Whether you know of an API to access it or a page to access it or not, that's public. You should always err on the side of caution when it comes to these things. So there's those two facets. And then thirdly, SaaS security isn't a majorly mature concept at the moment, right? I'd say through recent years with the emerging SSPM solutions like AppOmni, that is gaining traction with large enterprises. And so it was never really considered, right? It was never really given like a seat in the front when it comes to auditing or performing even penetration tests. It was often just ignored because
Yeah, SaaS
many, SaaS
altogether.
as a
Yeah.
whole, regardless of the applications, right?
Well, because it's shared responsibility, right? Who do you need to check with to make sure? Like I know AWS had their form you would have to fill out to do any pen testing against customer infrastructure, but in a lot of these cases, like I'm not sure there's a clear way to get permission from, some of these SaaS vendors to pen test a customer instance or customer data on that. Because in some cases, it's hard to avoid hitting all customers, hard to focus on just hitting that one, right? Not all of them are segregated like Salesforce sets up a C name just for your company, right?
Exactly. And even if we were to just say, okay, we'll audit internally, right? Visually, we'll just audit internally as to avoid unnecessarily damaging another instance that might be hosted on the same box or whatever it might be. Who audits it? Is it the platform administrator who knows, who's been working with ServiceNow for 10 plus years, right? They know all about it. Or is it the security
Or
teams
they think they do.
or they think they do, right? Or is it the security teams who are more generic web application testing, who are looking for the vulnerabilities, the SQL injections, the insecure direct object reference, that kind of stuff, who aren't familiar with these applications. And so there's even this internal struggle of, well, whose job really is this to tackle? And so incorporating testing for these misconfigurations into like an SDLC, like a life cycle, can be very, very difficult, right? So that is the third facet as well, which I've seen crop up continuously over the years.
Well, and one of the big issues, it's interesting here because when there is a bug that's clearly on the provider's side, right? That's a best case scenario because there's one patch, it happens once, affects all customers, usually, right? Like if Azure or AWS or GCP or Salesforce have some kind of bug to fix, vulnerability to fix, it gets patched once. But when it's on the customer side, like sometimes some of the stuff you're finding, you've now just found 3,200 companies that have all misconfigured this and all have data leaks. Yeah, effectively, you've just discovered 3,200 breaches in one go. And how do you handle, like from your side, the coordinated disclosure there? Is that something where is the SaaS vendor interested in contacting all those customers directly and saying, "Hey, do you need to do this?" Or do you end up doing that, like trying to contact all these companies? That's to me, that's one of the trickiest part is the remediation here once you found it.
Yeah, because and it goes back to that shared responsibility model, right? Will the vendor really say, "Oh, for these 10,000 plus or 5,000 plus customers, you're on your own here. You can all go sort this out." Or do they step in? And so with respect to my most recent article on the ServiceNow data exposure within knowledge bases, externally facing knowledge bases, we coordinated very, very closely with the vendor, with ServiceNow, as to how it should be tackled and how we can work together on this, right? Mm-hmm. And so we went through our disclosure process, which was to inform the vendor and make sure that they're aware of it. And then from that, help advise them as to what we are seeing with our own customers and emphasizing, okay, here's the issue, right? So for example, ServiceNow had some really, really great secure defaults to prevent this stuff from happening since a certain release version of the platform, right? So if
Mm,
you bought a ServiceNow instance in, let's say, 2022, for example, you had to secure the faults, right? Oh, but if you're an enterprise that had bought ServiceNow 10 years ago, well, we're not going to roll those defaults out to you because it could break something.
right.
It could block
We
access.
we saw this happen with LastPass, right? Like
Right, exactly.
yeah, the number of rounds of encryption, or I forget the correct terminology, wasn't applied to older people's data, older customers' data.
Exactly. That's the exact same situation. And so we had to work out between us, right? Between App Omni and between ServiceNow, what the best thing to do moving forward in the interests of every party, right? And the public. And ultimately, the decision was that ServiceNow would step in and enforce these secure defaults in the best interests of their customers, right?
Mm.
And the important thing about this is that this was a misconfiguration, right, made by customers. And customers still have the opportunity to say, well, I don't want this secure default because it breaks my implementation or whatever it
Mhm.
is. So they can always undo that change if they so wish. But ServiceNow had recognized the severity and the dangers of this. And it's all they can do if organizations aren't listening or reading the communications that get sent out to them from ServiceNow warning them, right? If they haven't heeded the warnings, I mean, what else can you really do?
Yeah.
You just have to do what's best. And I think they did that very appropriately and handled it extremely well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does seem like the pen test has always been that control. That do I have any gaps? Did I miss anything in security related and how I've set everything up, all my infrastructure? And if it's ignoring SaaS, I mean, we've got some companies that are SaaS first, cloud first is a thing where the vast majority of what they're doing for most companies, all their email, calendar files are all SaaS based at this point, and that seems like a huge gap. So do you think SaaS vendors need to do more here in terms of making it easy or straightforward for pen testers to check this kind of stuff, or do you see it as more of a something a posture management tool can help out with? Because we've seen, I think for a lot of what a pen tester would check 10, 15 years ago with something like Scout, is now done by a CSPM, is stuff that'll get caught by a CSPM tool these days.
Yeah, so well, one thing that I have seen, fortunately, with respect to what you'd mentioned earlier around, okay, do we even have permissions to test this? Most of the vendors that I've come to contact with through my research did have those clauses that allowed for testing
Oh, okay.
in the event that you give them a heads up, right? And as long as you don't disrupt anything or disrupt services for their customers, then it's
Mhm.
fine, right? Which is a positive.
Yeah. No denial of service attacks, please.
Right, exactly, right? So at the same time, like these are massively complicated solutions. And for many of them, like Salesforce and ServiceNow, like they can really be whatever you want them to be. They can be a CMDB, they can be an asset inventory for your hardware, software on your corporate network, or it could be external knowledge bases, right? Tons of use cases. And personally, pen tests, I do not think are the way forward at tackling these misconfigurations with SaaS because they're point in time. And that's the crux of the issue. I've seen many scenarios with customers in which we will discover something. We will discover a data exposure and they will remediate it. And at some point in the future, the same issue crops up because
Yeah.
someone's undone something or someone, once again,
No,
needs a role or a permission.
no regression testing, right?
Exactly.
They're not developers, right? They don't have this
Exactly.
engineering this thought process of, oh, I need to do regression testing, or, I need to do some automated tests and things like that. Like most of the people that manage these platforms don't have a development or, software engineering background.
Exactly. And so that's the power of SSPMs like App Omni, in that it's a continuous monitoring solution, right? So not only just from your role-based access controls, but also threat detection, all these other facets. And so we're not only caching it once and saying, okay, you're done, you can offboard.
Right.
Well, as long as it's connected and we're ingesting that data, we can create rules to effectively putting guardrails to prevent these things happening again.
Yeah.
And the second piece is I'm part of the App Omni Labs team, right? That is the research facet of App Omni. And so researching these applications is my full-time job. I'm going to find things that these platform administrators are not necessarily going to know about. And that's what we've seen with my research. And so I'm productizing these findings into our tool. And so it's like, let us be the experts and advise you, right? You can continue to do your day job and administer the platform, or be a developer on the platform, or if you're a security engineer using the tool, you can continue to be that. But let us be the knowledge gap. Let us fill that in for you so that you can quickly remediate the issues without having to need 10 plus years experience of the platforms, right? And so that's also the superpower of App Omni too.
Yeah. All right. For the last couple of minutes here, since I literally flipped my script here, I want to, over the last 5 minutes here, tell me a little bit about how you got into this stuff in the first place, starting from, the origins in gaming through, your time actually working for one of the bug bounty platforms to, this viral Salesforce thing that kind of launched you into this current role that you're in now.
Yeah. Okay. So the life story, I suppose.
In 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, right? Keep it short and sweet. No pressure at all. So it all started when I was at 15. And like any 15-year-old male, I imagine, obsessed with gaming, right? Online games with all my friends.
It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away at all. And so on one of the online platforms that I used to play on with my friends, my account was compromised, right? It was hacked and everything was taken, all my hard work down the drain. And I just could not understand how this could happen. Now, back then, I didn't know what phishing was. That could have been what had caused it.
What game was it?
Do you remember World of Warcraft?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, still around, right? So
okay.
My account was compromised. All my rares and epics and legendaries gone. All my gold taken. And all this time for nothing effectively. And so I went searching for solutions. Like, how could someone do this? Like, I need to understand this. And I stumbled upon some online forums and began to dig a little bit, right? But I kind of fell down this rabbit hole into web application security, specifically because I was like, wait, hang on, you can do SQL injection to extract things from databases on websites? Like, what is this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy. This, for the first time seeing any of this, any of this was possible.
I remember that moment too. The first time I made that work, and I was like, wait, what?
Right. So at the time I was reading had all these resources and I was reading them, but there's so much, right? Even in the OWASP top 10, you can go as deep as you want. There's so much, it is overwhelming. I was like, well, I'm never going to remember any of this stuff if I don't apply this. And so I'd realized, oh, wait, some companies will let you find vulnerabilities and you can report them, and I can get my name listed on Sony's website or get paid, right? Now, I remember back at this time, I don't even know what bug bounty platforms were around, but a lot of large organizations like AT&T and Sony had their own disclosure policies, right? And unfortunately for the majority, they were unpaid. which was fine. I was just trying to apply my knowledge. So I'd found a number of issues from these resources. I applied that knowledge, like SQL injection, RCEs, all that kind of stuff. And this was all just before I went to college. So I went to college, did a computer science degree. All the while, I was like, well, I need money to go out with my friends. I need some funds, right? So I'd signed up to the book binding platforms and was making a little money on the side through that. I thought this is going to be the career for me. Like, I love this.
You're getting paid to train, to learn, basically, right?
I'm getting right, exactly, and to hack stuff. So who doesn't love that? Like, it's cool. So it's always an interesting story to tell people. And so from university, I was a product security engineer at VMware. That was my first role. And that was just a very typical ProdSec role, like threat modeling applications, pen tests, that stuff, SDLC. And then I joined HackerOne as a actual member of staff, as one of the individuals, one of the analysts who triage incoming issues. So effectively, I would be assigned to, let's say, 20 companies, and I would need to read the reports coming in from hackers.
You're just making sure they're not getting flooded with like 10,000 cross-site scripting submissions, or they're just garbage, right?
Right. Cross-site scripting was honestly the best case with some of these submissions, right?
Oh,
you
no.
get some crazy things.
Yeah.
And so I was seeing all of these incredible security researchers with these incredible findings. And I thought to myself, well, I need to find something at scale, right? A lot of these issues are like once-offs, like a SQL injection in this or whatever. These classic web app vulnerabilities are always these once-offs. I said, well, I want to find something at scale that I can just keep reusing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a consistent issue for the foreseeable future. So after I left HackerOne, I picked Salesforce as the research target because of it being a massively complex SaaS product. And that's where my original research stemmed, right? The piece talking about all the Aura and Apex and the issues stemming from misconfigured access controls for the first time on my personal blog. That's where it all came from. And from that blog, I was contacted by AppOmni. So what was meant to just be a collaborative piece, right, where third party's going to pay me a little bit to talk about my findings and how AppOmni is a solution for this, turned out to be a trap to hire me. And so I joined a call and they said, well, you could do the collaborative piece, or you could just join us and be the founding member of this research function. And look, like, I needed a job at the time, and it was exactly in line with my interests. And I said, well, this solution seems very promising. This AppOmni tool seems like it can solve a lot. And I'm seeing these issues firsthand from my research, like, wow, this is a real problem that needs to be solved. And so I joined AppOmni, and that was nearly 4 years ago now. And that's how this whole thing happened.
Well, and having worked as a triage analyst, I think you can appreciate, and from my perspective, being in the industry for almost 25 years now, the quality of your write-up and how comprehensive and in-depth you went. Like, here's how to reproduce it. Here's screenshots. Like that's, that was better than any resume that you could have put together, because that's the ability to take, in some of these misconfigurations that you find are really convoluted. They require understanding, like in some cases, I didn't even know these products existed within Salesforce or ServiceNow. I didn't even know that they had this functionality. So there's a lot that people have to understand, that you have to explain all that context before you can even get to, here's what the misconfiguration is, here's what they were trying to do, here's how it happens, all those details. I think you did a great job of that, going back and looking at that blog post. It's easy to see why they wanted to hire you.
No, I appreciate those kind of words. And I think that is the ability to translate a very technical and, as you put, convoluted finding, to translate it into something digestible for everyone, right, is incredibly important. and not even just as a researcher, it's in many facets of many industries and many roles. It's a key requirement, right? Because nothing was going to be solved by me just dumping technical jargon into an article. All that was going to happen was some hackers would read it and use it maliciously, right?
Yeah.
If these issues are going to be fixed, you need buy-in in an organization. And typically these executives, they were technical maybe a couple of years ago or 10 plus years ago, but maybe not so much anymore. So it needs to be digestible, and anyone should be able to read the piece of content with zero understanding. And by the end of it, have some semblance at least as to what's gone on.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you did. And it's a great story. I love that we got to dive into that today, and also talk about the misconfiguration piece as well. But Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
No problem at all. Really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
All right. And we'll be back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.